What's up, friends? Welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I'm Shaw Local Bears beat reporter Sean Hammond. Joining me, as always, is Shaw Local's very own Michael Dwojak. Michael, it is a victory Monday for the Bears. They're 1-0 for the first time since 2020. Caleb Williams became the first number one overall quarterback to win his debut since 2002. That's kind of a crazy stat given the number of quarterbacks who go number one overall. We saw Caleb. It was not great. There's a lot of meat on the bone, I guess you could say, is the positive spin on that. We saw the Bears defense pick up right where it left off, 3 turnovers plus a special teams touchdown. But let's start with the quarterback. Michael, what did you think about Caleb Williams' debut?
You know, it was funny. I left Soldier Field yesterday, and I was kind of like, "What the heck just happened?" Just based on what we kind of saw with the expectations that we had with Caleb heading into the game. You could feel the energy before the game. Like, it was very clearly, it was a new era, obviously, of Bears football, and everyone was so excited. And then the first half happens, and you just kind of like, oh, like, whoa, like things are not looking too hot right now. But this is kind of what we said to expect, right? This is kind of something that we've been reinforcing all offseason, all training camp. Maybe it could have gotten a little bit better on Sunday, but I think Sunday kind of played out the way we kind of expected it to, right? You have a dominant defense, a defense that, could possibly at this point be a top 5 defense with the way that they play, a special teams unit that's obviously pretty good, and an offense with a lot of new pieces, including a rookie quarterback. So that kind of leads you to believe, Sunday isn't that surprising, even though I think a lot of Bears fans at the beginning of the game were kind of like, oh, this is a new era. Caleb Williams is going to throw 500 yards. And then at the end of the day, you just got a classic 24-17 Bears victory because of 3 Bears defensive turnovers. So a new era basically looked the same for Chicago here.
Look, if you can throw for 93 passing yards and still win the game, that's a great, that's a good thing. I think, I mentioned it on Friday. Like, I thought this Bears team was gonna get to Will Levis a couple of times. I thought they'd have a couple of picks, and they did. They also had a strip sack. Daryl Taylor doing work. TJ Edwards picking up the fumble, and obviously Jonathan Owens on special teams with a big touchdown. That's you love to see it when it's coming from all 3 phases. And at the end of the day, like, Caleb did enough to get them into field goal range a couple of times. I know, look, he took advantage of good field position, and that's what you got to do to win football games in the NFL. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty in the passing attack. I was a little surprised too that the run game was so slow to get going. Like, it just wasn't there in the first half, and maybe like a little bit towards the end. I thought DeAndre Swift had a couple of nice runs there in the fourth quarter as they were driving down for a field goal here or there. But there's a lot that this offense has to work on. There's a lot that Shane Waldron has to work on, and the surprising part too was the gimmies, the easy ones that Caleb missed. I think he was maybe off his game in that regard. Like, all preseason and in training camp, those were the throws that were on the money, and they just weren't yesterday. I don't know if it was first game jitters. I don't know what it was, but there were a couple easy tosses that he was just off the mark on.
Yeah, he missed, I think, it was kind of everyone kind of on the offense, right? At first you had that, the first play that kind of comes to mind is that Keenan Allen, run where he was wide open. And all he needed to do was just loft it in there, and he missed him on that front. Obviously, I know Keenan Allen later on dropped what would have been a touchdown at the goal line. So, I think you just kind of saw a quarterback. You didn't see him make the plays that he usually made in training camp at USC and the kind of stuff. And I know after the game, both him and Eberflus said there weren't really any jitters. He doesn't get nervous and that kind of stuff. But, I mean, let's be honest. You're starting in the NFL. You got the emotions of obviously finally being in the NFL after working your entire life to get there. So maybe maybe you just miss on a few plays here and there. But, I think the biggest thing that you can kind of take from Caleb in this performance was he didn't make the Bears lose the game, right? Like, he didn't do it. He didn't have any turnovers. He had a couple sacks that you were kind of like, what are you doing? Like, don't keep going back on a 19-yard sack. Like, that's obviously a rookie moment. But he didn't throw a pick 6 like Will Levis did, right? Like, Will Levis essentially kind of lost the game for the Tennessee Titans here, where Caleb, he didn't look great and didn't look accurate. He didn't have time, obviously on some attempts, but at the end of the day, he didn't cost the Bears a win, which I think is obviously the biggest thing and obviously a big thing for him growing wise moving forward.
Yeah, they didn't win because of him, but they didn't lose because of him.
Right.
I mean, I think for a rookie quarterback, like not just a rookie quarterback, but a rookie quarterback making his very first start, I mean, that's really all you can ask for. Just don't screw it up out there. And like you saw, I mean, that pick, the pick six from Tyreek Stevenson, I don't know what Will Levis was doing there. Like,
that can't happen.
Just take the sack, man. We saw him do that little flip earlier in the game. And I understand that you don't want to go down. You don't want to take a sack. It's third down and the game's on the line, but also like the game's on the line. It's 4 down territory anyway, so you're going to go for it, whatever. But yeah, that is the type of play that you didn't want to see from Caleb. And we didn't. Like, there were no like back-breaking plays from Caleb Williams. And it's funny, like we were talking before the game, you and I, Michael, about, if we were going to write like, the Caleb Williams highlights story and all that. And unfortunately, like there really wasn't any like worth writing about. I think the 11-yard scramble might've been his best play of the game. And, you can blame Keenan Allen dropped a touchdown. That would have been a highlight. Obviously first career touchdown pass for Caleb. We're still waiting to see that. And yeah, like there were some times where the offensive line wasn't perfect by any means. And really like this whole unit, honestly, like I agree that like I left the stadium feeling like, well, that wasn't great. But then and especially for you and I, who are like so locked into the Bears on Sunday afternoon, we don't get to watch all these other noon games. Like that's week 1 football, man. There were only 2 quarterbacks who threw for 300 yards so far through week 1. I know we got another game tonight here on Monday, but 16 quarterbacks didn't even reach 200 passing yards, 16 starting quarterbacks this week. And so I wouldn't be all that worried about what we saw from Caleb yesterday.
No, and I think the biggest thing is like, I feel like this kind of needed to be reiterated where they won. They won this game. You obviously saw the Cincinnati Bengals lose to the New England Patriots. Like you could have easily been in that situation where, you lose in week 1. And I obviously think it's the best case scenario where you found a way to win the game. Caleb learned a lot. I think you're learning. We'll obviously get into this. I think you learned a lot about what your offensive line is and isn't at this point. And obviously we can address that and what that really means for the future here. But at the end of the day, you won a game. I know that's obviously cliche, but obviously that's the reason why you play the game. And that's the reason why, you go through this, right? You just want to win this game. They found a way. The defense found a way. And then obviously the defensive players, after the game said, listen, there's going to be a time where the offense needs to pick us up, right? Like that's just going to happen throughout a regular season. So, and obviously like that could have happened in the second quarter where the defense did not look good at all. Like they just kept giving up rushing yards and, fairly easy plays to the Titans, and obviously they turn it around. But, it's what you expect in week 1 football. You found a way to win the game, and that's obviously the most important part right now. Now it's that important week here, which I know in every level of football, every coach will tell you. From week 1 to week 2, how do you improve on that, and how do you kind of take from what you saw in week 1 and kind of apply and move it forward?
Yeah, and I think that's real too, even just from like the viewer perspective, those of us who just watch these games. Like, not everything you see in week 1 is how it's going to be all year long. This is a long season. These teams are going to adjust. I expect passing across the league to get better. I expect Caleb Williams to get better. That's just a fact of the NFL. Like these teams, especially the way that they're hardly playing in the preseason. There's the passing game is so much about rhythm, and it takes these guys a little bit of time to get that rhythm back after a long off season. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you guys jumping on live with us. Do us a favor, hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. If you're listening later on Spotify or Apple, please subscribe, leave a review. Those are great ways to support our show. And as always, head over to shawlocal.com. Please consider subscribing. That's the number one way to support us and to support our work. Keep an eye, if you're listening later, keep an eye on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going live on YouTube. And you can come join us. I see lots of folks in the comments. We got Sports Chicago Style jumping in, saying hi. We got Rick, who's already got some thoughts on the center position. CJ jumping in wants to point out that his score prediction was correct. So great job, CJ.
Thank you guys. I would like to point that out too.
Nice job, Michael. Thank you guys for joining us live. We do want to get to your questions, but first we're going to play a little game. We're gonna go ahead. We're trying to get a few more segments into the show here and there. We did that on Friday. This one ain't that creative. Winners and losers, but we're gonna try to get creative with the answers. Since the Bears won, we're gonna go winners first. Michael, we're gonna pick 2 winners each. Who's your first winner of the day from yesterday?
I think my first winner is gonna be Daniel Hardy. I'll go with Daniel Hardy just because of he blocked that punt. I know obviously this fun story was with Jonathan Owens and, him recovering it and bringing it back and that kind of stuff. But, that was the first time that Daniel Hardy has ever blocked a punt in his life, like not in the NFL, like not in high school and college or anything like that. So that play just changed the game. Like the momentum completely changed. Like they were down 17-3. The defense just, got a nice stop and then forced a punt there. But, the way the offense was moving, you weren't guaranteed to get any points, and so I think that for him to kind of, go up the middle, kind of create the pressure and to block the punt and then for Jonathan Owens to recover it, that was huge. And I especially for a guy who, we were talking about, whether he's going to make the roster, what is his spot on the team? Is he going to be a rotational guy and that kind of stuff? I feel like that's kind of fun just to watch a guy that maybe, a lot of guys probably didn't know about heading into training camp and that kind of stuff. So Daniel Hardy's definitely one of my winners. Another winner, you and I didn't talk about this, so maybe we'll overlap a little bit here, but I'll go with Taylor as well. He joined after getting traded from the Seahawks for a 6th-round pick. It's fairly easy to just be like, well, that stinks. Like I thought I had a lot of promise with the Seahawks. This coaching staff doesn't like me. But that wasn't Taylor's approach. Like after the game, he talked about how like, I'm not changing anything. I'm just going to do what the coaches told me. I'm going to fit into the scheme. And that's exactly what he did. He had 2 sacks. He had 8 tackles. And then he obviously had the big strip sack that got points on the board to kind of make it a 17-16 game for the Bears. And that changes obviously the game because then you are up a touchdown toward the end of the game as opposed to, needing to get a field goal. So, that was such a big play. The pressure that he kind of created, that defensive line created a lot of pressure throughout the game. Obviously, the second quarter was a little bit something that, they didn't really like and obviously didn't work out that well. But for the most part, that defensive line was buzzing out opposite of Montez Sweat, whether it was DeMarcus Walker, whether it was Booker a little bit, and then obviously Taylor coming in. He's definitely my another, bright spot where he comes into a team, a couple weeks, before the regular season starts, and he makes an impact right from the start. And obviously that trade already, you only gave up a 6th-round pick. That trade already looks pretty good.
Yeah, I wrote out a few more winners and losers than we need because I didn't want us to overlap a little too much. But one of my losers here was the Seattle Seahawks because of that trade. That clearly is looking like a good deal for the Bears. I know week 1 is week 1. I mean, a couple of years ago, Dominique Robinson had a sack and a half in week 1 and then was quiet the rest of the year. So take everything with a grain of salt, but it's off to a good start. I mean, that's exactly what the Bears needed. We've been talking since January about getting another defensive end opposite Montez Sweat who can make something happen. And, when Montez has a quiet day and when he's facing double teams, to have a guy like Darrell Taylor over there who's able to make some plays, that's a really, really big thing for this defense. CJ threw out Darrell Taylor as one of his winners. Rick says Taylor and Billings.
Billings had a big game too.
Yeah, Billings did have a nice game. Sports Chicago Style says Carter and D. Taylor. CJ wants to mention TJ Edwards as well. Yeah, I mean, TJ, obviously we saw him get the fumble recovery, but I mean, he seems like he's picking up right where he left off last season. Okay, so my 2 winners. I'm going to start with Tyreek Stevenson's floor. I don't know if you heard this. He wants to take all his interception footballs and put them in his floor someday. Right now they're sitting up in a closet in his house, but Tyreek obviously. And look, that was an easy pick. Will Levis basically put it on a platter for him. But to get a pick 6 right there, that was Tyreek's first ever pick 6. High school, college, NFL. He was telling us yesterday, he's like, I've scored on punt returns. I've scored on offense. I've scored this, that, never had a pick 6. He was so jazzed about that. And so I felt really good for him to have a big day. Obviously you saw Jalen Johnson get paid over the offseason, and look, Tyreek had 4 picks as a rookie. He's playing in a really good defense. Like, he's thinking about that down the line. You got to keep those interceptions coming if you want to make the big money at cornerback. I'm going with Tyreek Stevenson, and he's one of my winners. And at the same time, like my other winner is going to be this is a 2-parter. Everybody who started the Bears defense in fantasy and slash Matt Eberflus and his defense. This was a defensive win, and this was a Matt Eberflus defense right there. Like, that's exactly what we saw the second half of last year. That's exactly what we wanted to see. We wanted to see them start strong. The defense, that was what set them in a hole, is just, and not the defense, but the team starting slow last year. And that wasn't the case here. Yeah, sure. Caleb Williams got off to a slow start. The offense got off to a slow start, but everybody was making plays. You saw Jalen Johnson with that late pick to pretty much seal the deal there. We talked about Darrell Taylor getting to the quarterback. Look, they did all that basically without Montez Sweat, like doing much of anything. And so when your best player has a quiet day and you still have 3 turnovers and you're still scoring a touchdown defensively, and you could throw in what they did on special teams with the punt, that's a really, really good day for your defense. And that's exactly what you wanted to see from Matt Eberflus's defense in week 1.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I would agree with you. Matt Eberflus is obviously a winner, because if they lose that game, I can't imagine what the hot seat conversations are already about how do you lose to that team? The offense looks bad. Why'd you hire Shane Waldron? Blah, 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 that kind of stuff. But I would definitely agree that defense and Matt Eberflus kind of combined are winners, just based on you're seeing the hits principle. And I know people get really annoyed because that's, the hits principle, when it came out, everyone's like, all right, everyone can come up with an acronym.
Yeah, it's hokey, sure.
Yeah, but it works, right? Like, it works for this defense. It works for what they're able to accomplish. And that's the biggest thing, because you don't win that game if that hits principle doesn't come into play, and the guys really believe in it. So you saw that throughout the day, the pressure that the defensive line created on it, that led to Will Levis making really bad choices, 3 turnovers. So, definitely I would agree with you there. Definitely big winners on that front.
Okay, 2 losers, Michael. Who you got? What are your 2 losers for the day?
All right, I'll grab the low-hanging fruit. Obviously, it's going to be Bayless. It was so sad, because I feel like as soon as it happened, the whole press box was just gasped and was like, oh no. Like, you just, obviously you need to win the game and that kind of stuff. But from a human element, you're kind of like, man, you just feel bad for the guy. Like, that was the one thing that couldn't happen for him, especially after all the talk about him in training camp, the conversations, in Hard Knocks that we kind of saw, and the decision for why they decided to keep him. And then for him to just, do that and then kick the ball, like, obviously I know he didn't do it on purpose, but to kick the ball to the Titans, and luckily they only got a field goal out of it. I mean, that's just so tough. And obviously he got benched as a kick returner from that. And things actually worked pretty well for the Bears after that, right? Like, I think it worked pretty well once you put him to the bench. And obviously Bayless got some runs in there. That looked pretty good, honestly. I think he got a couple for more than 5 yards. But I mean, at that point, I don't think you cut him right now, but at a certain point, you just need to have the conversation. Do you just trade him and that kind of stuff? Did you miss your opportunity to trade him for what his highest value is going to be? And now teams are going to be like, listen, if you don't want him anymore, there's a reason for that. We're not going to give you a higher pick. So, I would say obviously Bayless is one of the losers.
No one's going to trade for Bayless after that. And because that at some point the Bears are just going to cut him. You're not going to offer up, unless you're really, really high on the guy. I don't think you're going to offer up much of anything draft pick wise. That was the amount of time that we've spent talking about this guy all off season.
Yeah.
And kick return, wide receiver, running back, all this stuff. What's he going to do? Where's he going to contribute and all that stuff? And a new kick return rule. He has to be rock solid on kick return. There was an audible gasp in that stadium when that happened. That was one of the most surprising things I've ever seen on a kick return. The way that he kicked that football. And it's just unfortunate for him. You got to feel for the person, of course, but they have just kept giving him chance after chance. And at a certain point, you gotta give up on it. I mean, at this point, like I don't think you want. At this point, the best possible way to get him the football is to hand it to him. You know, to put it in his gut and stick it in his hands so that he cannot possibly drop it. And sure, maybe he could try a screen pass. I think he did do catch a reception on a screen pass at some point in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. You could say DeAndre Carter's a winner in this game too, because 66-yard return. That was impressive. And look, he's a pro's pro. He's been around the block. I see no reason why they shouldn't just keep going with him moving.
Yeah, and that was kind of something that I kind of wasn't surprised that they decided to kind of split it up, right? Like usually, I know obviously each team is different, but usually your kick returner is your punt returner too. So I was always interested to see that. They took Velus off the punt return and then they put, obviously Carter in. But Carter has shown that he can do it on both ways, and I don't really think you should at this point. Listen, we can get into I don't know how much we want to spend on the Velus conversation because obviously there are bigger things to talk about in this episode, but it'll be really interesting to see just what the snaps look like once Roschon Johnson comes back healthy.
Yeah.
Are you really going to take away snaps from your pick last year for Velus Jones? Eventually this kind of goes back to the whole conversation that we had when they decided to keep him. Whose snaps is he going to take away, and whose active spot on the roster is he going to take away by being on this team? So that'll be a really interesting conversation to see. And obviously we'll see if Matthew Eberflus talks about it more today at Hallis.
Yeah, I did have Velus Jones as a loser as well. I'm going to throw another loser, Rome Odunze's first career reception. That was weird. That was not maybe how Rome was dreaming of it, his entire young life, waiting to get into the NFL. That was a pass intended for DJ Moore that bounced off a defender, flew up into the air. Rome caught it, got clobbered, fumbled. And thankfully, Tevin Jenkins was there to pick it up. Yeah, pretty quiet day from Rome. He's a rookie too. Like obviously, when you only have 93 passing yards in the game, there's not a whole lot to go around. And DJ and Keenan both had a handful of receptions, So there wasn't much. There wasn't much there for guys like Rome, for guys like Cole Kmet, for Gerald Everett. There wasn't much in terms of receptions. And yeah, that was a weird start to Rome Odunze's career, but honestly, he's going to get more chances as this passing attack gets a little bit more rhythm, a little bit more experience. I think all of those wide receivers are going to see more touches.
Yeah, and I think that that play was definitely one of those many plays I feel like yesterday where just kind of like what just happened. Like you just needed to take a second and be like, what did I just watch? Like that doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I would agree. This offense will get clicking sooner rather than later, you would think. Obviously, we'll see, Keenan Allen, how healthy is he? I feel like he kind of seemed a little dinged up. Seemed like that heel might still be bothering him from training camp that he's kind of been dealing with for the last couple of weeks. But obviously, we'll see how it goes for the rest of the way. But I would agree. I think once this offense starts to click, you'll see more Rome Odunze. Obviously, I feel like you saw a pretty good amount of DJ Moore. I think you kind of saw them trying to utilize his, playmaking ability. But I think we'll see more Rome once the season kind of progresses here.
Michael, you got one more loser for us before we move on?
Yeah, and I think this will kind of go into the next section that we kind of want to talk about. Obviously, I think the losers are – I don't know if I want to say the whole offensive line, but I think it has to be Nate Davis, Bates, and Shelton, right? Like after I rewatched the game, obviously when you watch the game from up in the press box, you don't get to see, as much as you probably would want to once you watch on TV. And, watching the replay on TV, you're just like, man, Shelton just and obviously I know the Titans defensive line is talented. They've got a lot of great guys on that team. So I don't really want to go full doomsday and say, this offensive line is trash, terrible, but you saw a lot of things that you saw with Justin Fields, right? Like where you just have barely 2 seconds to make a play, 2 seconds to really decide what to do. And Caleb Williams is having to either run away, scramble, or he keeps going backwards and he gets sacked, right? So, listen, a lot of the mistakes that Caleb Williams made are on him. He missed some pretty, consistent throws that he should be making in the NFL, and he's shown that he has made in the past, so he's got to work on that. But his offensive line did not really, set him up for success at all. Just from the center position and the right guard position. Caleb Williams, there were a lot of instances where he had less than 2 seconds to decide what to do, or he was going to get sacked, or he had to scramble to his left or right and then try to figure out, like, am I going to go out of bounds? Am I going to throw it away? Or am I going to try to make something out of it? And obviously that's not ideal for developing a quarterback.
No, you're right. I mean, the number of times that he had to just make something out of nothing because there were issues there in the middle of that offensive line was too many. And it sucks because that's like been that was such an emphasis this offseason, was improving that center spot, and you brought in 2 guys to try to do it. And, you're hoping that Nate Davis has a more normal year than he did a year ago. And obviously that's been not really the case, at least in the offseason. And so, you got these guys, you got some combination of these guys on the interior, and it looks like it's going to take them a few weeks to figure this out. I mean, at some point you got to settle on a starting lineup. You got to go with Bates or Davis. I think Flus said after the game, like, that's a rotation at this point. That's fine for like week 1. That's fine when you're coming off an injury, as Ryan Bates is. And he said Nate Davis was. Davis was injured earlier in camp, but was back for a while. At some point, you got to get this thing locked down. And you don't want to be rotating guys in and out as moving forward. You got to figure this lineup out, and then you got to figure out what the heck you guys are doing out there, because there were some times there where guys who are supposed to be rock solid, or guys who you're going to be relying on, whether it was Ryan Bates, whether it was Coleman Shelton, didn't look so good. And I do think that the offensive line is much like the passing attack. I think they're going to need a little time to get this sorted out. They're going to need some reps together in real live action. The preseason goes fast, and you really don't have that many snaps, and you really don't have a defense that's game planning for you. That's the big difference. Like, they're all running vanilla stuff in the preseason. And now you got teams that are going to be game planning for your offensive line and for your quarterback, and where are the weak points? How can we attack that? And so, it's hard to do that on the fly, and it doesn't really get any easier this week. You're talking about, a team with Danielle Hunter in the Texans, a team that's got Will Anderson on the other side. Like, it's going to be a tough test here in week 2.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough test, and it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do. Obviously, like with Caleb, we said, you don't draw huge conclusions after week 1. You don't decide whether someone's a bust. I know, obviously, it's easy for – I think it's fair for a lot of fans to be like, what the heck are we seeing? Like, we didn't see anything for most of training camp. And then in week 1, Caleb is, following the same trajectory as literally every Bears quarterback, it seems like, for the past, past decade. So I understand where everyone's coming from. You just got to build that consistency, right? You got to figure, is Shelton your center? Is Bates going to be your right guard? And if he's not, do you look at Davis as your right guard and then put Bates as your center? It seems, for most of training camp, it seems like Shelton was getting, especially toward, later part of training camp, he was getting the starting reps. So I know Bates will obviously be consistent with that, but it'll be interesting to see what to do. And I've seen a lot of fans be upset with Ryan Poles for not, he invested in Nate Davis, obviously, by giving him that contract a year ago. But other than that, it's obviously been, drafting and, just bringing guys in. So it'll be interesting to see what this staff decides to do. Obviously, I know they're not happy with what they saw yesterday, but listen, you need to figure things out quickly. You got Houston coming up, and you can't have, Caleb Williams developing habits that kind of sunk other Bears quarterbacks because they've learned that they just need to be on the run and they need to run or whatever, and that leads to injury and that leads to bad decision making, and we do this whole process all over again. So I think it's fair for a lot of Bears fans to be upset with the lack of investment in the offensive line that Ryan Poles might have done, but again, like we've said with everything else, you need to see it develop. You need to give it time. What happens in week 1 isn't going to happen in week 17.
Yeah, and like on paper and at the very start of camp, we saw that lineup with Ryan Bates at center and Nate Davis at right guard. And I think like, yeah, on paper, that's what you want to do. But if Nate Davis is out there and he's a liability, like you just can't do that.
No.
And so, yeah, that's forcing you to go with Shelton at center and Bates at right guard. I don't know if it would make a difference to switch those guys. If Shelton's more comfortable at center, just leave him there. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be better from Nate Davis. I think that would be that would kind of be the key. Like if he's as good as you hope he can be, and what you saw in the past in Tennessee, then you could confidently put him at that right guard spot and move Bates back over to center. But at this point, I don't know if you can do that after what we saw yesterday. And I see some comments in the chat here. Bringing up Mercedes Lewis, like, get that guy back out there. Get some extra blocking help if that's what you got to do.
Team, right?
Yeah, that's why he's here. He had 9 snaps yesterday. If that's what you got to do to protect your quarterback, I think you do it. Another point that I saw in the comments too is Gerald Everett 34 snaps, Cole Kmet 27. What do we make of that, Michael? I'm not sure what to make of that.
I feel like you kind of got into, once you saw what the game plan was going to be, I feel like you kind of realized that you needed to change things up a little bit. And obviously Cole can block, fairly well, but I don't think it's by any stretch to say that he's more of a pass catching tight end and that kind of stuff. So, we'll see what that kind of means. I thought it was interesting that they started running the ball a lot early, and then they kind of gave that up a little bit toward, the middle of the game. They kind of relied on the pass more. And I understood where that was coming from. If you aren't getting any holes and you aren't creating many opportunities, like we saw DeAndre Swift got stuffed up a lot, and that kind of stuff. So I think they probably relied more on just protecting Caleb as best as he can. And obviously that didn't work as well. And that took away a target for Caleb eventually. So it'll be interesting to see just how much Shane Waldron fixes that, or, changes that. I don't know if fix is the right word, but kind of changes that against the Texans, against another defensive line that is just really able to pressure the quarterback. And it'll be interesting to see, do you see more 2 tight end sets? Do you see more Everett than you do Kmet? Those are just things that will be kind of interesting to see as we move forward here, as you kind of, at the end of the day, you're trying to, protect Caleb as best as you can. And if you're not doing that, then you're not really going to have a successful offense.
Yeah. And I see Robert here is asking about the Texans defensive tackles. Look, Jeffrey Simmons is one of the best dudes in the league.
Right.
Like that's a tough matchup for anybody. You look at the Texans. I haven't had a chance to go back and watch that game against the Colts yesterday. I gotta watch that a little more in depth. But really the strength of their defensive line is on those edges. They got Mario Edwards, one of their defensive tackles in there. They have Foley Fatukasi, if anyone's familiar with him, former 6th-round pick from 2018 is their other starting defensive tackle. I don't think you're really scared about either of those guys. But yeah, obviously the strength for the Texans, and we'll talk about this more on Friday, but the strength is on the edges with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, of course. The Bears are going to have to figure this out as we go. Obviously, that's a tough matchup for the Bears defense. That's going to be an interesting matchup excuse me. What did I just say? I said the defense. It's going to be an interesting matchup both ways, whether you're talking about the Bears offense or defense, because you got CJ Stroud on the other side. We'll talk about that more on Friday. Michael, any other thoughts, comments coming to your mind as we sort of wrap up this week 1 discussion here?
We kind of see, what there's a lot to work on here, obviously, right? This isn't a perfect product by any means. I don't think any NFL team is a perfect product in week 1. And we knew all of that, but I think the biggest thing you can kind of take from this week is the Bears found a way to win and Caleb didn't find a way to lose, right? I think that's the biggest thing you can take from this game, where the defense looks as good as advertised. They look like they're going to be a top 5 defense in this league. I think you're really encouraged by the defensive line, right? I think you are hoping that you found something there and that your belief in your own guys is going to pay off with DeMarcus Walker, with Hardy, with Booker, with Robinson, and obviously Javon Dexter. We haven't talked about him, and Billings. They looked really good up the middle too. So I know obviously there were some misplays in the second quarter, but other than that second quarter, that defense looked really good and looked good as advertised. And for the offense, you kind of take this game as if this is rock bottom, things are pretty good, right? Like if you're like, all right, you only threw for 93 yards, you missed a couple of your throws that you should have made, but you didn't cause any turnovers, and you still were able to get some sort of points off of those defensive turnovers. I think that says a lot about this offense, right? That, they're able to make the most out of what they have right now. They're going to develop, they're going to get better. Offenses start slow in this league. They start slow in every level of football. I've been seeing it in high school right now. Like offenses are slow to start the year. So I think you take a lot of positives out of this, even though does feel like a mixed bag. And I think you try to grow on it early. And this is the biggest thing that Eberflus was talking about, right, during the preseason, where what is Justin? Geez, what is Caleb going to do? What is Caleb going to do this week? What is he going to do today? What is he going to do tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, to kind of grow and get ready for a tough opponent week 2? Because this is when things get real, right? You can spend your entire offseason getting ready for the Titans. You can spend a couple weeks. You can do everything you need. How are you looking at the tape? How are you growing to get better in week 2? Because now things are real. Now things are, you don't have all this time to prepare. Now is the timing where you got to get used to this NFL schedule, and you need to improve while doing it.
Speaking of Justin, he got a win yesterday, starting for the Steelers. Looked like he had a decent game. I didn't get to watch any of that, but not nothing too crazy stat wise. But Justin got a win too. And here's a bit of hope for Bears fans. Okay, last season, week 1. CJ Stroud's offense put up 9 points and he was sacked 5 times. It's week 1 as a rookie. Like, as long as this is maybe a low blow, but as long as you're not going out there and looking like Bryce Young did yesterday, I think you're happy. You're elated because not all these number 1 picks work out, as we're seeing what's going on in Carolina. You got to have the Bears have done a nice job putting pieces around him, and that's exactly. We spend so much time talking about those weapons on offense, but it applies to the defense too. You got a good defense, that makes a huge difference. You got a good special teams unit, that makes a difference for your rookie quarterback. And you're right, Michael. This is where they have to. This is where they make their money. It's between the games. It's what goes on during the week. This is going to be a long season for especially for the rookies who have never played a football season quite as long as the NFL.
Right.
How do you respond to that adversity? I really do think that we're going to see a lot better offense next week. It's a different. Obviously, we're talking about that D line for the Texans, but it's a different challenge. Every opponent is a little bit different, and I do think that they're going to adjust and they're going to look a lot better next week. Look, end of the day, it's a win. And so you're going to take that anytime. You're going to be happy with a win. The Bears are 1-0. And sure, you got a couple of tough opponents coming up. The Rams looked pretty good last night. They're not too far down the line. The Colts. It's going to be fun to watch this team adjust and hopefully grow as they move forward here in the 2024 season.
And I think you kind of saw some good things from yesterday's, post-game press conferences, right? Like, I feel like it could have been easy for Caleb to be, pouty and be like, I didn't have a good day, but the team won and that kind of stuff. Like, we've seen quarterbacks do that before, right? Like, where you're just kind of like not enjoying the win because you didn't do well yourself. But you could see Caleb, like, he had the right attitude. Obviously, maybe it's all like, I'm not saying that this is the case, but obviously he knows what to say during the press conferences. And, he reveled in the fact that he got an NFL win, right? That's all that matters. Like, it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Winning in this league is tough. It's not guaranteed for any team. You could be the best team playing against the worst team and you could lose. Like, that's just the parity of the NFL that gets us also hooked on the NFL, right? Like, anything can happen any single game. And I think his approach about it was good. Like, listen, he said, I didn't look good. I didn't have a great game, but we still won the game, and that's all that matters. So I think that has to leave Bears fans obviously encouraged to be like, he's got the right mindset. He's got the right headspace. And I don't really doubt that he was up until midnight, maybe texting coaches, being like, looking at tape, being like, yo, like, I'm sorry I messed up on this play. What should I have done on this play? What would have been a better look? Because, he's dedicated to that, and he's going to be looking to get better as soon as possible.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Like, this is a guy who's gonna be trying to get better as soon as he possibly can. We're going to leave it at that, end it on a positive note. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Please hit the thumbs up on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, give us a review, leave us a rating. We really appreciate you guys listening to us. The number one best way to support the show is to head to shawlocal.com, read our stuff. Please consider subscribing. That's what pays the bills. So we would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing. He's Michael Dwojak. You can find him on Twitter at mdwojak94. I'm Sean Hammond. You can find me at Sean_Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the week. We'll be back with you on Friday talking Bears Texans.